It's the final week of the month. You know what that means. It's style study time. And today's style study is going to be very interesting because in many ways, I feel like this artist's way of rendering is pretty much the opposite of how I usually paint. So this is going to be an interesting challenge. Today, we're going to take a look at the ethereal, otherworldly portraits of California-based artist YUMING. This video was requested by our Discord member Sugar Ray and backed up by Akima and Belle. So thank you guys so much for requesting this video. I really hope you enjoy it and that it's everything you've been looking for. If this is your very first style study, hi, welcome. My name is Srish and I'm so glad you're here because today we're going to level up your art by like 1,000,000%. Style Study is a regular series we do here on my channel where we take a look at some of our favorite contemporary artists, analyze their work and see what we can learn from it. Keyword, learn. We're not here to plagiarize anyone's work or copy their style. We're only here to learn some really cool art tips and tricks and see how we can apply them to finding our own unique art style. I usually structure my style studies in 3 parts. In part 1, we'll take a look at YUMING's work, analyze their style and see what we can learn from it. Part 2 will be a study of one of their original paintings. The stunning reference that I've chosen today is this one. And in part 3, we'll apply everything that we learned today to an original painting of our own. Of course, if you enjoyed this video and learned something today, please do remember to like and subscribe. Comment below your biggest takeaway from this study and come say hello on social media. All the links are in the description. Alrighty now, if you're ready, grab a snack, sit back, and let's dive into another style study featuring YUMING. YUMING is an artist based in Burbank, California, and that's about all we know about them. There is no other info out there, no interviews, absolutely nada. However, their style is not only interesting, it is also incredibly unique because you have these gorgeous, very expressive and dynamic portraits which somehow also look like they were sculptures cast in plaster or made of marble or porcelain. YUMING's unique style has garnered them over 319,000 followers on Instagram and over 233,000 followers on Twitter. If I had to pick one word to describe YUMING's style, it would have to be impressionistic. A lot of the form in the faces, hair and clothing aren't so much detailed as they are simply indicated. If you zoom in close, you see that the brushwork is more abstract than it seems at first glance. In today's video, I really want to focus on YUMING's use of light and color, as well as their skill with using limited brush strokes that make the textures look painterly. Honestly, I'm so in love with this style and this has taught me so much that after this video, you can just call me an iconojulist. Speaking of lists, here are 4 key characteristics to YUMING's art. One of the very first things I noticed in YUMING's art is that they use a mix of high and low contrast areas in a very consistent compositional sense across pretty much all of their work. And it always has to do with story. There's a pattern there, we love a pattern. So first off, there is always very high contrast between the subject and the background if the subject is meant to feel out of place in their environment. More often than not, the subject is brightly lit with very high values, while the background is much darker and low value. Here's an angel who's painted in very high value colors, with the darkest form shadows going no more than about 60% dark. But you look at the background surrounding this character, and it is extremely dark. Not only is this great for making the character silhouette stand out, it also tells us how out of place this high value light being is in the surrounding low value darkness. Here, however, you have the opposite, where the background is very bright, but the character appears to be very dark and gloomy. It's almost like she's grieving something while the world around her is vibrant and happy. Sometimes, however, you'll see a more nuanced story. Like here, for instance, the character's face and torso are extremely bright, as is some of their hair. But the coat and background, and most of the hair, are rather much darker. It's like there is a bright light within the character, but it is dampened and darkened by the world around her. Now to even smaller nuances. You'll see that within the face, the contrast is extremely low, where values really lie in a very small range. All the details are very gentle, and it really makes the skin look so very soft, almost like marble. Because marble statues are made of a single material, right? And so it is all gonna have the same value range across the skin. It is this low contrast of the skin that makes these characters look more like sculptures than like people. This is usually contrasted by the much higher contrast hair and clothing, which often act as framing elements. As a result, the softness of the skin is further enhanced and the gentle nature of each character really shines through. YUMING's work involves this beautiful interplay of hard and soft edges, but it's often difficult to tell where and why these are placed. Let's first talk about the hard edges. You'll find these liberally spread all across the fabric, hair, and especially in the little accessory elements like jewelry and ribbons and headdresses. However, these hard edges are often there purely to indicate occlusion and sometimes drop shadows. This piece is a great example because there are so many folds in the fabric, but a lot of them are doing very different things. So with occlusion shadows, there's some very hard edges under the cloak here, in this fold at the waist, and also under the hair here. And with this massive drop shadow of the arm, you have another very hard edge. Plus, there's the more subtle but still hard edges where the folds are turning away from the light at a sharp angle. However, look at the form shadows, like the ones here that wrap down her torso. See how those appear to be a lot more gradual and blended out? Same with this highlight that runs across the top of her chest. It has very softly blended edges too. With the hair, you'll find that it's a little more tricky because it looks like it's a lot of soft blending, but the truth is, YUMING is just really good at color control and shape language. Look at this piece. The hair looks soft, but when we zoom in, it is literally made of like 80% flat shapes and very little actual blending. In fact, what I love most is the fact that the only real hair texture you see is at the edges of this white highlight, and even that is so incredibly subtle. It's literally a couple of little brush strokes, but it instantly gives you the impression of a full head of hair. That's how good YUMING is at shape language. And now looking at the skin, it's quite the opposite, or so it appears. The whole thing is so extremely softly blended, the skin just looks really smooth and super soft. This is especially true down the front of the face, where it's like a continuous flat patch of skin from the eyes down to the jaw, with a bit of hue and saturation variation. However, we do see lots of hard edges at the facial features. The eyes, the eyelids, the nose, mouth, and ear are all places with hard edges, but because the colors are so similar to the skin surrounding these features, it all appears soft anyway. The one place of a high contrast hard edge in the face is only visible if there is a very strong light source that hits the character from one side or directly above. Like here, you see that super sharp razor edge of light going down her face? That is a super high contrast hard edge, and it is pretty much the only scenario where you will see this higher contrast in the face. Now, this is where things get interesting because the colors in YUMING's work are truly ethereal. I'm talking specifically of the colors in the skin and the hair, because most of the rest of it is fairly believable. But with the skin and hair, you'll often see these high saturation pops of color like pink, blue, and purple, sometimes even turquoise and green, that give the skin this almost holographic quality. The key is to use several of these colors in the skin, but I've just realized while writing this script why these look so iridescent. It's because none of these colors are reflective of the color of the light source. Take a look at this painting. You have this hard-edged, warm key light, but in the shadows, do you see the super saturated blues, purples, oranges, and even greens? Same here, where the light seems to be warm when it hits the hair, armor, and fabric, but the skin seems to be reflecting a lot of blue and purple, along with the warm reds. However, when YUMING wants to make characters look less otherworldly and more human and realistic, you'll see that the colors of the skin match the temperature of the light source just fine. Like here, the light source is cool and it reflects cool pinks in the face and also cool tones in the hair and clothing. Or here with a slightly warm light source that reflects everything to be slightly warm. So the iridescence is, again, a big part of telling the character's story. How cool is that? You'll also notice that the shadows are usually very warm and saturated, which is usually indicative of subsurface scattering. The brightest highlights, on the other hand, are very desaturated and often cool toned. This is another really nice element of contrast that makes the skin look vibrant and dynamic despite the very low value contrast. Let's quickly look at the brushwork in YUMING's art, because this is where it all comes together. Even though the faces look super smooth and blended out, there is actually a lot of brushwork going on in there. If we look at this painting here, it all looks very smooth and blended, but when you zoom into the face, you start noticing the brushwork. Of course, the most obvious one lies in the shadow of the eye socket. There is a lot of texture there. But when we look into the smoother areas, we start to see that there is actually a little bit of low contrast brushwork everywhere. In the chin, for instance, it is very subtle, but there is some vertical texture lines in there. In the side of the face, you have a little bit of a textured highlight. And coming down to the neck, there's more brushwork, this time a little more visible. In fact, apart from the very rare specular highlights, you'll see that the vast majority of the visible brush texture actually lies in the shadow areas. The highlights and midtones are often rather smooth, which is interesting because we're generally taught to interpret light the other way around. We're usually told that shadow obscures details while the light reveals them, so lost edges generally belong in the shadow. But YUMING actually paints most of the textures in there. I just thought it was an interesting juxtaposition. Another thing I really love is the brush economy. This, I believe, is key to a more impressionistic style, is the ability to indicate details without actually rendering very much. How can you use the least amount of brushwork to convey the most information? But what's even cooler is that YUMING tends to keep the brushwork nice and tight and clean around the focal point of a piece, usually the face, but their strokes become more and more impressionistic as you go further away from the focal point. So here, notice how the rendering is really polished around the face, but gets rougher and less defined as you go further away from the face. Here's an example of a non-human character that shows the same technique, where the eyes and nose are really well rendered, but as you go further away from there, the brushwork becomes super painterly and impressionistic. This is an excellent compositional tool because it drives your viewer's eye to the focal point, but without needing things like leading lines or the rule of thirds. Subtle, but super effective. So, to sum up part 1, here are 4 key characteristics to YUMING Lee's art. Number 1, YUMING uses value contrast as a storytelling element, where sometimes the characters really stand out from the background, while other times their outfits cause them to blend into it. 2. The interplay of hard and soft edges creates a lot of textures in the hair and fabric, while the face appears to be a lot softer and youthful looking. 3. The colors of the skin sometimes appear to be iridescent and otherworldly, while other times they reflect the light source naturally. It's all about the character and their story. And number 4, the brushwork is very impressionistic and powerful, where you have a lot of polished rendering at the focal point, which becomes looser and more painterly as you go further away from it. For our study today, this is the beautiful reference that I've chosen. I feel like it covered most of the bits that we spoke of in part 1, but would also be an easy-ish study. I was right about one of these. What's interesting is that I didn't need very much of a sketch to get started, because most of this was rendering and exploring the values. So after a super rough bunch of lines, I went straight in with color matching. Thing is, with how impressionistic and painterly the style is, I really didn't even want to do a block in to begin with, because clipping layers felt unnecessary, especially given how there were pretty much just 3 elements: the hair, the skin, and the shirt. And they also just all have very messy edges. The reason I bring this up is because I wanted to tell you guys just how freeing this process was. Like, it genuinely felt like painting traditionally, without the complications of loads of layers or blending modes being crucial to the painting process. Also, we had a power outage halfway through painting the hair, so if there's a clip missing, it hurts me as much as it hurts you, and we'll write to the power department together, I promise. Now, let's talk about the struggles this study went through. First and foremost, the likeness. Now, I always say that the more stylized something is, the easier it is to nail the likeness. That said, with YUMING's style, I feel like most of the stylization comes less from the proportions and mostly from the rendering and textures. So in a way, the face is very close to realistic, at least as far as the proportions are concerned. So I struggled with the likeness. Also, this is not an angle I draw very often, so that was an added challenge. But hey, we mess up and we get better, so it's all good. The other big challenge, and this was probably just me, you guys might not have to deal with this, but the textures in the hair. Oh boy, no matter what I did, it just would not turn out right at all. But after giving it several passes, I had to give up, so here's the finished study. Proportions could be better, but what do you think? Let's now talk about my absolute favorite original painting for a style study so far. I wanted this to be an emotional piece for sure, just because I paint neutral and happy faces all the time. But just like with the study, I started with just the roughest, most basic sketch and painted the background first. The background needed to be abstract, so I just grabbed some random texture brushes and threw on some very simple shapes. This time around, I did want to play with some more iridescent skin tones, starting with some lavender high value tones, which I blended out. But everything had to be very low contrast in the face, and as someone whose tendency is to always overdo the contrast, oh, this was a challenge. I did find myself a little stumped occasionally when it came to her outfit. I really wanted to play with a headdress and like old-timey jewelry, but not too crazy flashy. What really took this piece to the next level was really saturating the shadows in the eye socket. I made them super warm, and it really pushed the colors to the next level. I also added some smaller details for the jewelry, but the key is to not make it too well rendered. We wanted to give the impression of jewelry, but not be hyper realistic. All in all, I really love how well the expression came through while still having that painterly abstraction as we go away from the face. What do you think? So there we have it, Yumingly demystified. That color palette gives me all of the holographic vibes, you guys. I'm so obsessed. But what is your biggest takeaway from this study? Comment below and let me know. And of course, if you enjoyed this video, then please make sure to like and subscribe and maybe share this video with an art friend so that we can all learn and grow from this style. I have, of course, linked Yuming's work down in the description. Please make sure you go check them out and show them some love for me. And also massive thank you to Sugar Ray, Akima, and Belle for requesting this video. I really hope you guys especially love this and that it's everything you've been looking for. If you enjoy what I do and would like to grab bonus content such as all the speed paints from start to finish, my custom brush kit, and also now merch, you can grab all of it by becoming a patron. My patrons really help support this channel and keep it going, and tiers start at just $1 a month, and your support would go a really long way in helping me do what I keep doing. So yeah, I'll leave a link up here in the cards, and thank you so much for checking it out. Or you could just come say hello on Instagram and Discord. Those are free and links to those are down in the description below. Finally, are there any other artists you'd like to see a style study on in the future? First, check out my style study playlist. It will show up here in the outro in just a second. I've done a ton of these already, and chances are I've probably covered some of your faves on the series before. But if I haven't, then feel free to comment below which artists you'd like a style study on in the future. Or better yet, come tell me in the Discord server so it doesn't get lost in the comments, and I'll try to add your artists to my ever-growing list. And that's about everything for this video, so thank you guys so much for hanging out with me. I really hope you've enjoyed it as much as I have. Check out some more style studies down here, and I'll see you guys on the next one. Bye!